Hello everybody, Roger here again, and today is going to be a rhubarb harvest day. We got this big patch of rhubarb there and behind me, or in front of me now. But yeah, we're going to harvest this today. It's our personal patch, and yeah, so I'll show you what we do when we harvest rhubarb. So yeah, let's get at it. And since the spring when I first came in here and did my weeding, it's grown in a little bit, and it's a little late in the season to harvest, but I mean it's still good stuff here, so that's what we're gonna do. And raspberries are looking good in our patch. The roosters are a little excited because there's an eagle in the neighborhood that keeps flying and attacking. I think there's a nest nearby up in one of these trees up there. So up in one of these trees up there is an eagle nesting, and it's got babies, and it keeps coming down to attack our birds. So I have the guineas locked in. And these things are horsetails. They're a weed. They have really long tap roots, so it's hard to get rid of them. And it's actually edible. You could get your silica from this. You can make it into a tea, dry this out and make it into a tea, or you could suck on the ends and get water out of it because they hold on to water in the ground. But for us, as you can see, it kind of chokes out all the plants, so you just uproot it and throw it aside. And looks like we got some volunteer potatoes. These are potato plants here growing in these tires. Looks like it's doing pretty good. If I added some grass clippings or something down there, I'd probably get a few potatoes. This is a technique I saw on the internet, how to grow potatoes with stacked tires, and you put the potatoes in the bottom tire and then you fill it with some grass, and as it grows you just add grass to it. However, I've heard that the chemicals in the tires leach into potatoes, so whether or not it's safe, I don't know, but you can get pretty good yield of potatoes from it if you give it a shot. And this here is what the flowering stem of a rhubarb plant looks like. Usually if you see this, it means that that plant hasn't got enough nutrients and has gone to seed. So if you catch that in time, it won't wreck the plant, but if you let that happen, it puts all its energy into the flower and doesn't produce the fruiting leaves, because you eat the stem of these stalks here. If you see this stuff, it's called comfrey. It's kind of got a fuzzy kind of leaf, and it's got this flower here. It goes a long stem, but the roots, as you can see, here's one root, they just grow off all over the place, and they get quite large, like here, and they break off real easy into the ground, and every little section that breaks off starts a new plant. And this stuff could really choke out a rhubarb patch. Even though rhubarb tends to grow out in big fanny leaves, this could take over. So you don't want it growing amongst your rhubarb, so if you see it, get rid of it. But it is also medicinal, and people make salves and stuff out of it. So it's beneficial, and it's good for bees too. It's one of the plants that bees love to pollinate. So it is beneficial. So if you have a spot just for comfrey, put it there because it does spread. And I learned the hard way about putting any of this comfrey, especially comfrey with roots, even a little chunk of root, into the compost, because it's still something I have to dig out of the compost every year. You can see over here, these are comfrey plants, and they're way down in the ground here. No, I can't. But if I had a pitchfork, I could dig it up for you. I don't have a pitchfork on me right now. But let's see here. Yeah, see, it just breaks off like nothing. And each time it breaks off, it starts a new plant. So I separate the comfrey. I also separate the Morning Glory, as you can see here, Morning Glory. I put those in separate piles. I'll even put the horsetail in the same pile, and I tend to burn it so it doesn't promote it from spreading. You can see here the horsetail would outgrow the raspberry plants if I don't stay on top of it, but these bushes are a few years old now, so they're rising above the horsetail, but it can choke everything out. Let's go harvest some rhubarb. The size of some of these rhubarb stalks. It's a nice chunk there. Alright, so for those of you who don't already know, rhubarb is a vegetable, but it's got this real sour tasting stalk, and you can chop this up and they use it in desserts. So pies, you've probably heard of strawberry rhubarb pie, and stewed rhubarb jelly is something we make. So yeah, it's a dessert vegetable. So the leaves are poisonous, so you see me cutting off the stalks and you throw them away because they are full of oxalic acid and it's poisonous. When you're harvesting rhubarb, you want to reach as close to the root as you can so you don't break it off at the root, and just pull it up. It comes up pretty easy. Another thing to note with rhubarb, you want to leave the part of the leafy stem on the stalk, and that bottom root that you pull up from the root wad. You want to keep that on the stalk, and the reason for that is if you cut that off, it will start splitting down and it'll lose moisture, and you'll lose more of the actual edible piece, which is the stalk itself. So if you keep that on there, it prevents it losing moisture and it prevents it from splitting. Beauty. Look at that. Thing I should say about rhubarb is it's a perennial, so it comes back year after year, but it does eat a lot of fertilizer, so you have to fertilize it in the spring, otherwise you just get tiny little plants, which happened to be what happens up in the upper lot because I haven't been fertilizing it. But this is our own personal rhubarb patch, and we've put cow manure on it, you have to let the cow manure sit for at least a year before you put it on, so we usually keep it in buckets along the fence. I'm going to do some weed whacking in here, but just giving you the idea here. We fill these up with cow manure. We've got about 20 buckets, and then we let them sit here for a year, and that's what goes on to our rhubarb, usually early in the spring. And then we refill these buckets and it sits for another year. This rhubarb patch here has been here since I was a kid. It's something my parents put in, and I keep it up with my mother and keep this traditional rhubarb patch going every year. So this is what happens when you give a good dose of manure as fertilizer to your rhubarb plants in the spring. You see, these are really thick stalks. Nice. Now, this is something that happens quite often when you're harvesting rhubarb. You can see this stem broke off and didn't separate at the root. You kind of want to go as close to the root as possible and just give it a wiggle and a pull, and it just comes out. But sometimes it breaks off. Now, you don't want to leave this here, because if you leave this here, this could rot, and it can rot your root, killing your plant. So it's best to just pull that off, and then that stimulates new growth. You can see this is going to be a new leaf, so you can get a couple harvests in a season. And my tub is starting to fill up. Rhubarb can get quite heavy. It's got a lot of weight to it, so I don't mind packing this tote at full capacity, but if you can't handle it, don't lift a big amount of rhubarb all at once, because it can get really heavy. And I just throw off the leaves off to the side here. If this was up in the upper lot rhubarb, where my big half-acre patch is, I would just throw the leaves between the plants. But we usually just throw it over here onto our compost pile, and that goes on the berry bushes next year. Now you can see this big old pile of the rhubarb leaves here. This is one option you could do, is just take a leaf and you throw them in between the plants over there. And it'll help keep the weeds down and also fertilizes the plants, like so. It covers the ground up. Now I usually throw the leaves in our compost bin down in our personal rhubarb patch, and I just wanted to show you here what you can do with the rhubarb. Again, you just throw the leaves between the plants. These will all rot, and it'll provide fertilizer, and it'll help keep the weeds down and let the rhubarb get itself reestablished for the summer. And I'm just going to leave the rhubarb here. Usually after July 1st, you kind of want to leave your rhubarb alone after that and let them just collect nutrients throughout the summer so they could survive through winter. So rhubarb is something you harvest mid to late spring. Alright, I got a nice full tote of rhubarb here, so let's go and process this. Alright, this is our setup here where we're going to start chopping up and processing the rhubarb. We got our cutting board on a clean outdoor table. It's a beautiful day here, and we're going to package them in bags. So we'll cut them up on the chopping board. We'll fill this bin up with water and then just give them a little bit of a scrub. Then we're going to cut the ends off and then chop them up into bits, throw them into here, and then load them into bags, and into the freezer they go. So I'm just going to hose them down here, and then I'll fill this up with water, give them a little bit of a scrub before chopping them up and putting them in bags. Look at that for beauty. I was just considering letting my birds loose from the pen but I see the eagles are hovering here. There's been that one eagle that's nesting nearby that keeps hunting our livestock. So I think the guineas are going to have to stay locked in for a little while longer until the eagles find new hunting grounds. And this is my mother. That is a nice one. This is my mother's cutting up the rhubarb into chunks while we're letting the tub fill up with water. And we give them a nice little rinse. And we cut them into chunks and put them into these pots, and when it's a full pot we'll start putting them into bags. And my mom was just telling me that this rhubarb, our personal rhubarb patch, originally was down at the graveyard property where she grew up, the property beside the graveyard in town in Sontela is where my mother grew up. And these plants date back to when she was a kid growing up. And we moved them here when my mom met my dad, and we grew up as kids. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, and we all grew up having this rhubarb patch. So this is something we do every year. We process our personal rhubarb patch. This is a good example. If you cut off the ends of the rhubarb, it starts to split and peel like this, and you end up losing a lot of good product. So it's best to leave the ends on until you're ready to cut the rhubarb, or else it'll start peeling. You lose moisture, you lose stock, you lose product.
Some people peel it outside, peel off, but it's not necessary.
No, not when you're going to freeze it.
It's not necessary. I got one woman. Oh, I gotta peel them all, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. So we're just going to cut off the ends and then just chop this up into little chunks. See here, we got our cutting boards, knives out. We've been cutting them into chunks, throwing them into these pots. We have some nice clean rhubarb laid out for us to grab. We got our bags ready and the pen there. And we just give these a little bit of a scrub before we pull them out of the tub. We're already working our way through. And then we throw the ends, the stem and the root end in here, and that goes into the compost. And yeah, this is going to be what we're going to be doing the next little while. So we usually use medium-sized Ziploc bags, and if you don't want to get the name brand, you could just get a generic brand from whatever store you're at. And we use the medium-sized bags because It holds 4 cups, and whenever you're going to use rhubarb to make something with, like any desserts or baking or anything, you usually use about 4 cups. So we use this measuring cup. It holds about 4 cups. We got it marked at the 4 cup mark. Fill it up to 4 cups. And then just fill up the bag. You don't want to go any more than 4 cups because the bag might not seal that. As you can see, 4 cups fits nicely in a medium-sized Ziploc. And you just zip it shut up into most of it shut, and then just push the bag to get the air out. Zipper shut, and then it's ready for the freezer. And we got almost a full box here. We got about 28 bags of rhubarb total in our personal rhubarb. So that's enough to get us through winter until next spring. It's about maybe 30 pounds worth of rhubarb. Nice haul. Now we take these and we put them in the freezer. Alright, that's all I got to say for today. So thank you for watching as I did our annual rhubarb harvest. And I want to just add that it's Pride Month, and I want to say Happy Pride Month to everyone in the LGBTQ community. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to follow along in my video series. And I'll see you all in the next video. All right, ciao.